Good evening and welcome to the March 13th Cabarrus County Board of Education legislative session at J.M. Robinson High School. I'd like to thank J.M. Robinson High School's leadership team for hosting our meeting. I'd like to recognize the principal, Mr. Dennis Tobbs, assistant principals, Ms. Ashley Lee Bost, and Mr. Stacy Douglas. I'd like to recognize and thank the Cabarrus County School Administration team for their role in coordinating these efforts, as well as our camera and tech teams for setting up the audio and visual equipment so we can record and live stream this meeting. That team consists of Mr. Mark Russell, Mr. Willie Hunt, Mr. Keith Motley with Crown, and Mr. Matt Lacey with our CCS Technology Department. We'd also like to thank our J.M. Robinson custodial team for their efforts in getting our schools and keeping them so clean. Thank you to our board members, our superintendent, our board clerk, and our guests. We are grateful to have our North Carolina legislators with us tonight, as well as our Cabarrus County commissioners and our CCS leadership presenters and the public. And we'd also like to thank our SROs for being here as well. So we will move to 1.01, and I call this legislative meeting to order. We will move to 2.0, opening ceremony. We will have our presentation of the colors and our national anthem. Please rise at this time.
Presenting tonight's colors are members of the J.M. Robinson High School Air Force JROTC program, and their personnel includes Cadet Major Sarah Henson, Cadet Master Sergeant Ajane Stewart, Cadet First Lieutenant Alexis Herrera, and Cadet Technical Sergeant Lucky Chakalakonda.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight? Oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Carry. Colors. Left face. Forward. Arch.
Honoring America tonight with the singing of our national anthem were members of the Patriots Elementary School singing Red Hawks, and their personnel includes Harmony Miller, Harper Koloski, Anish Suresh, Isabella Ray, Drew McKee, Layla Lee, Tabitha Grant, Jamie Wentz, Nadaria Boyd, Abby Miller, Avanja Vinay, Stephen Muhammad, Elijah McVeigh, Mela Green, Ashwika Pulagam, Shanvi Gimare, Grayson Muller, Jenya Badiga, Raina Marsh, Ariana Gaines, Kyla Northern, Shauna Baker, Saket Chirlam Chirla, Colton Wilbanks, and Austin Hollis. The director of the Patriots Singing Red Hawks is Mrs. Savannah Heminger. Thank you.
Okay, board members, we will move to 3.01, where we adopt the agenda. I need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Ms. Lindsay,
So moved.
second.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Lindsay, a second by Mr. Treadaway. Are there any discussion about the board, agenda board meeting, members? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, board members. The agenda is adopted as presented. So we'll move to 4.01 in our introductions of the legislators. We are really happy to have you with us tonight. I'm going to give a little bit about each of our North Carolina legislators. We have Representative Diamond Stanton Williams here. Thank you, Ms. Williams, for being here. She currently serves in her first term on the following committees at the North Carolina House: Appropriations, Appropriations Capital, Disaster Recovery, Homeland Security, Environment, Federal Relations, and American Indian Affairs. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We also have Representative Kevin Crutchfield in his first term. He serves on the following committees: Appropriations, Appropriations Education, Education Universities, Health and Local Government, Land Use and Planning. Thank you, Representative Crutchfield, for being here. We're glad you could be here tonight. We also welcome Jack Lambert, and he is with Representative Kristen Baker's office. Representative Baker was looking forward to attending the meeting. However, as the Chair of Appropriations of Health and Human Services, she had to attend a budget meeting, and that was scheduled last week. She serves on the following committees: Appropriations, Health and Human Services, Health, Appropriations, Education Universities, Election Law and Campaign Finance Reform, Families, Children, and Aging Policy and Insurance, and she is the co-author of House Bill 253, Prevent Students from Harm Act. So, Jack, we thank you for being here and representing Representative Baker this evening. We also would like to welcome our county commissioners: Chairman Steve Morris, Commissioner Kenny Wortman, Commissioner Christopher Meesmer. Commissioner Barbara Strang is not here, and we have Vice Chair Lynn Shue here as well. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. So we will now move to 5.01 in our board legislative agenda, and we will start with our presentations.
Let's control the book. There we go.
So again, I'd like to thank everyone for being here this evening, especially our locally elected officials and our state representatives from the General Assembly. We appreciate your time. We also understand how incredibly busy you are, and we just want to make sure that we continue to do what is appropriate and add one more meeting to your schedule. So we do thank you for being here. We appreciate it. I'd also like to thank the Board of Education for hosting this legislative agenda meeting and for being dedicated to doing what's right by kids at all times and continuing to advocate for kids and children in the Cabarrus County school system. So what you're about to see is the legislative items that our board has collectively worked together to support. And our aim and our goal and the intent this evening is to inform all of you here where we're coming from and what we would ask that you support as our legislative agenda. These items are, as you will see, very important to us, and we want to make sure that we get our voice heard and that we advocate in the appropriate way to inform everyone here this evening what we are doing at our level to try and support the children of Cabarrus County schools. So without further ado, I'm going to ask some of my cabinet members to come up and present each item. As you're going to see tonight, I am consistently and constantly surrounded by excellence. I have some phenomenal people that work with me and continue to support all the things that go on here in the Cabarrus County school system. As I tell them all the time, and I reiterate all the time, is none of us is as smart as all of us. And I am very blessed and fortunate to work with the wonderful people that I have in my cabinet and and all the directors and assistant superintendents that surround me with their excellence and their support. So you're going to see that this evening, and I've asked them to present so I can, put a name, you can put a face to a name, and you can quiz them and ask them any questions in their areas of expertise, and please feel free to interact, and we will begin that meeting this evening with Mrs. Amy Lauder and Mrs. Amy Jewell are going to be our first speakers. They're going to talk to you about school safety and mental health.
There, is that better? Okay. So it is it's our pleasure to be able to be here tonight to talk for a little bit about school safety and mental health. Let's see. Making sure we forward the slide. Did someone else want to start with that slide? Just want me to continue? Okay. All right. So we would like to open. Amy's going to talk for a little bit about some mental health, but we first want to introduce ourselves. I'm Amy Lauder. I'm the Director of Student Safety and Wellbeing.
And I'm Amy Jewell. I'm the Director of Student and Family Support with Cabarrus County Schools. So tonight we are going to share with you a little bit about what mental health and safety look like in Cabarrus County Schools. But I first want to thank you for all coming to the table for this extremely important discussion. We're very lucky in the school district to have a lot of support from our cabinet, from our local government, and there's a push for from the state to really improve mental health services for all students in K-12 education throughout the state. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about some really good things that we're able to do, some good things that we're seeing, and some of the really tough stuff. There is a very real youth mental health crisis that is taking place that we are in the midst of right now. And there are some barriers, right? So we are doing some things that I think we're pretty proud of, that our people are working really hard to make sure that our students are getting as many services as possible. But there are certain barriers like funding and resources that we really need more advocacy, and we have to look at legislation to try to improve, to bring more services directly to our students and prevent crisis, which we're going to address as well.
We want to say thank you for all the funding that local and state representatives have been able to provide for us. We are grateful for the funding because a lot of that does support our work. One of the things that this supports is the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction Center for Safer Schools School Safety Grant. That is a partial funding for our school resource officers and a lot of our safety equipment and safety training. So we're grateful for grant funding support for that. And did you want to speak for a little about mental health?
Sure, and so there's a lot of attention, there's a lot of discussion about youth mental health, and I am very grateful that the state has put this school mental health policy into place, and with that comes our 5-year school mental health and social emotional learning improvement plan, and that is mandated for all public school units throughout the state. And the intentions are amazing. It is increasing access to services, it's increasing ratios for mental health professionals in the schools, it's prevention, it is everything, crisis protocols, agreements with the surrounding providers to make sure that we're all wrapping around our students. And so again, best of intentions, but it is completely unfunded. And so we're going to talk a little bit about those things. When we want to improve services, we've got to make sure that we are creating pathways and resources that come with funding so that we can really bring these visions and plans for improvement to fruition.
So mental wellness affects all aspects of our lives. We in Cabarrus County Schools are very grateful for talking about physical safety and psychological safety. Oftentimes when you think of safety, you may think of just the physical pieces, things like door locks and metal detector checks and book bag checks and things like that. There's also this whole realm of psychological safety and a really big focus on prevention. When we can focus on prevention, it really does help to prevent those activities from occurring that take up so much of our resources and our time of addressing it after the fact, after the incident's already occurred. Do you want to speak for a second about mental health, some of the initiatives?
Yeah, so we try to really move back towards prevention, but it's very difficult when we are addressing everything from a crisis perspective. And so, I think that when we talk about improving school mental health and the functioning of our students, we've got to really look at sort of this baseline programming. What can we do to reach all students so that we can put preventative measures into place so that our mental health professionals, our school social workers, counselors, psychologists, and nurses can intervene earlier so we can reduce the level of crisis that we're seeing. And we're going to share some of those statistics with you here in a minute, but we are definitely seeing higher trends as far as suicidal ideation, self-injury, behavioral threat assessment, things like that.
So we want to also say the pandemic has not caused these problems, but it has compounded these problems. And so we see a lot of that outcome in the situations that our students are enduring. As Amy mentioned, we are seeing just an incredible amount of anxiety and depression. Suicidal rates are up. As a nation, we're struggling with students who also have some eating disorders and lots of behavior disorders, particularly around aggression and lots of younger children.
And I'll add on a little bit with school safety. So when we're seeing these higher rates of anxiety, depression, what have you, you have to remember that those higher rates of potentially mental health issues that can turn into illnesses, they reduce our students' ability to cope in a healthy way, to emotionally regulate. It causes a lot of very reactive behavior. And so with that, with this increase in that reactivity, we're seeing an increase in threats to school safety because our students are really reactive and they're emotional and they're asking for help in ways that will get attention.
Some of the things that we see as a nation as increased activities are active shooter events, swatting incidents, where they're making fake calls, trying to get law enforcement support out to additional houses. We also are seeing increased, like we mentioned before, suicide and bomb threats. On the flip, we're also seeing a lot of positive. We see a lot of resiliency in our students. We see a lot of students talking about mental health, a lot of students reaching out for support, saying something when they see something that's a little bit off. Those have been really positives that have come out of this.
So here I'm going to share a little bit of the data with you to kind of bring it to life. So we were very fortunate. Last August, we were able to use some of the COVID relief money, that ESSER money, and we were able to hire a mental health data analyst. And it is an extremely important position, so I would say if there's anything that you can do to help districts get a dedicated mental health actual analyst so that it's not just anecdotal and we're not just reporting crisis, we can really and truly look at the trends that are happening. We can see the services that are being needed. We can look at demographics in different parts of the county where things are happening. It'll really help us to be able to identify where to pour our resources. So when we get all these new positions that we're going to advocate for, where do they need to go? How do we help the students that need it most and then filter out? So here you have just a few things. We started tracking in September of this year. It took a year to build the database, a few months to train on it, and then we started tracking in September. Counseling, we do individual and group. Crisis protocols, and that consists of behavioral threat assessment, suicide assessments, self-injury assessments. School-based therapy referrals, so when our students are coming to see their school mental health professionals, again, that's your school social worker, counselor, psychologist, and the needs are higher than what we could provide directly in school, we refer out to bring treatment providers from the community into the school building to work with our students if the parents permit. And then day treatment referrals, so we have an elementary and middle school program, and day treatment, if you're not familiar, it's the highest level of mental health care our kids can receive in the community before sometimes parents and caregivers are forced to look at out-of-home placements for their students. And so we are very fortunate that we have those in-house here in Cabarrus County Schools. We also track our calls to mobile crisis, and so Daymark provides that service here in Cabarrus County. And mobile engagement is actually what it's called. It should not say mobile crisis, but we call them if any person, does not matter the age, is presenting with an imminent threat to themselves or somebody else. They will send a clinician out. Referrals for additional outside services, hospitalizations, and that's a little bit tricky because when we know about them, we can document them. We don't always know, and so that's something that we're working on with our partners in the community as well. And then parent education and support, and that could be as simple as educating on some resources that are available in the community or having one-on-one meetings to discuss student mental health symptoms and how to intervene early and support our students. So some numbers we can share here is that from September through February of this year, we have provided services to 4,698 individual students, so that it's unduplicated. So that is the number of students who have received services in Cabarrus County Schools from our internal school mental health professionals. And of that number, we have provided 24,490 services combined of all of those things that you see on the left. So we're not only tracking just the students, but also the services. And the three most frequent services that we are providing are individual counseling, as you can see, with over 17,000 sessions being provided, group counseling, and then parent education as well. And in a minute here, we're going to talk about some of the barriers to providing some more services. I can actually picture it, sure. Sorry. Okay, so in that top corner, if you see that pie chart, that is a breakdown of our crisis protocol. So on this screen, this is the highest needs that are being addressed through intervention. So this is our crisis page. So of those protocols I mentioned, really only about 1 to 2% of our student population are going to receive those services. That is the top tier if our students are presenting as if they're truly a threat to themselves or somebody else. And so the majority of those, as you can see, are behavioral threat assessments. And our CISP teams, that's again, counselor, social worker, psychologist, nurse, and we partner with our SROs and administrators in those situations. As a team, they go through a very in-depth behavioral threat assessment to assess safety and then truly just to put interventions and supervision plans in place, potentially provide services as well. And then the next highest would be suicidal ideation. And I truly wish that we had comparable data from last year. We don't have it yet, right? So we will next year, but just to see the trends, because it feels like those rates are getting really high. And so next year, we'll be able to see what that truly looks like. And then last but not least is that suicidal, non-suicidal self-injury, meaning if a student is threatening to or is cutting, burning, anything like that from themselves. And so we have protocols that we go through, we partner with families, and then depending on the level of need there, we have different avenues that we funnel to get students services immediately.
We also have an anonymous reporting system. We utilize the Say Something app. So it is the Say Something anonymous reporting system that anyone in the community, parents, concerned citizens, students, they can utilize this app through either a web device, texting, or through a phone call. And so you can see our numbers. This is just from July 1st of 2022 until this month. We've had 342 tips come in. You can see it's all hours of the day and the night. We have additional data here on Gaggle. So Gaggle is a real-time online monitoring tool. We're looking at student information on student devices or using school servers. And so anytime there's a questionable word that comes up or a concerning statement that's made, the information is shared with a team of people at the school and myself, and we look at what is the concern. If the student is in school, we can advocate and get our CISP to go in and help to figure out what's going on. We can pull the student. If the student is after hours sharing some concerns, then we can go and do a welfare check. We partner with law enforcement, and we're able to track down the student to make sure that they're safe. We had about 1,200 of those, again, since July of this year through this month. You can see those categories. The largest is going to be suicidal ideation and then violence towards others. Those are some that do take up a lot of time and energy. Because, again, Amy talked about the behavioral threat assessments that go into place. So we utilize a lot of our staff who are fully trained in being able to incorporate those into the students' safety and well-being plan. Again, the graph at the bottom shows just the hours of the day and the night. Our student safety doesn't end whenever they leave school. We continue monitoring students, making sure if they have a concern that they're telling someone about it and we're getting services to them as much as we can. As Amy has talked about, we have only a certain number of staff and resources available to conduct this service, so we're doing the best we can. We actually have a really great model, but we still need additional funding and supports to be able to make that work to reach all these students' needs.
Correct. And what Amy Ladder won't tell you is that for the last few years since we've had these good services in place, I don't think she's ever slept through a night because these are around the clock. And so, yes, we're catching kids and we are finding them and we are partnering. And those things are amazing because it's hard to measure prevention. I'd like to think that we've done some good here and our people have too. But with these new mandates, right? There's not any more resources. So in the middle of the night when these are coming in, she's getting the calls, right? And we're waking up and making sure that our kids are safe, because that's what matters and that's what's important. But we see the mental health fields dispersing. We see people leaving the profession, not just in schools, but in mental health in general, because of the level of burnout. And so we've really got to look at how we can better support our people so they can better support our students and families in the community. Okay, so if you've heard us speak in the last few years, you've heard us talk about these CIS positions, and today will be no different. We are, like Amy said, we have a really good model. We have a comprehensive model. Our counselors, social workers, psychs, even our nurses, they're all trained, and they are, I would consider most of them expert mental health professionals. And that 4,600 number I gave you before, that's how many students that we've been able to serve directly this year, that's about 13% of our current student population. But statistics say about 1 in 5 students, right, have untreated mental health issues or diagnoses. So we know that 13% is not that 20%. So we are missing. And so even though I personally feel like we hire the best social workers, counselors, and psychologists around, and they work hard. I mean, they love it, right? They're here for our students. They can work around the clock, see students all day, but with these numbers, you can't get services to every person. So you have the recommended ratios over on the far side of the screen. You can see counselors 1 to 250, social workers 1 to 250, psychologists 1 to 500. In the middle there, you have the current averages for the state, from the state. This is from Department of Public Instruction. So looking throughout North Carolina, what is the average that districts, the average number of CIS that districts have. And so you see that there. And then current CCS ratio, and that's really where I want to draw your attention to today. I'll speak about social workers first because that's who I have the privilege of working the closest to. We are sitting at 1 social worker to every 1,144 students. And I've got an awesome team. But if we're supposed to be 1 to 250, and honestly 1 to 50 in a high-needs school, again, it is a capacity issue. I want to make sure that we are reaching that whole number and that no students are being left out. You'll see counselors here. Their ratio is a little bit better, but it's not perfect yet. There is at least 1 counselor in every building. Some have 1, 1.5, some have 4 or 5, and they are pretty amazing. However, with psychologists, which I know you'll speak to in a minute, and social workers, because we don't have enough to even cover buildings, we're not just talking about getting down to ratio, but we don't have 1 dedicated for each building. They're split positions. Even more can fall on a counselor to assess because they might only have a social worker or a psychologist 1 or 2, maybe 3 days a week at best. And so that's just something that we really implore the state to look at and support. You know, there's a lot of really positive talk about improving mental health, and I think that's really good because a few years ago we weren't having this discussion. But we've got to figure out how to fund these people so that we can better help our students. I'm going to pause for a second if you want to talk about psychologists.
Sure, and just to elaborate on what Amy said, so we are operating in a fractured framework, and what I mean by that is the counselors, since they're the ones who are in the building, they're taking the brunt of all the mental health work because their mental health counterparts, the social workers and psychologists, can't be there because we don't have enough of them to have them staffed 1 per school. School nurses are also a part of this. We're very fortunate. We have a great collaboration with the Cabarrus Health Alliance. We have a nurse at every school, and we have a school resource officer through our partnerships with law enforcement at every school. But it's just the social worker and psychologists, we're still itinerant there, trying to get more and more of those to help support because this shouldn't all be falling onto the counselors for their load just because they're present in the schools. As far as the psychologists go, so I'm very honored to be able to supervise the school psychologist, and our numbers are growing, so we're much better than we were many, many years ago. We still have a far ways to go. If you do look at the numbers, we are better than the state average, so that is wonderful. What often happens, we are, depending on the time of year and the way the pandemic worked, a lot of our psychologists end up having to do special ed evaluations that take away some of their time. So if we have more psychologists to help spread that wealth, then we're able to support all students in a more comprehensive manner, including the mental health component.
And just like we always work better on a team, like I come to the table with a very unique lens, so does Amy, so does the rest of our student services leadership. And it's there because there are things that I'm going to see that she isn't, and there are things that she is trained to see that I am not. And so we've really got to make sure that we have fully dedicated teams at each school so that we're approaching our children through a multidisciplinary lens, and making sure that we're not leaving anything out there unseen, uncaught. You know, it's been a struggle. I just have to say what it is. And we've grown, and I can't thank this county enough because there is so much support of the mental health positions, not only within our district, but just within our county and our county commissioners. So that mental health plan that I mentioned before, the state mental health policy, it urges school districts to have a 5-year plan on how you're going to improve all of those ratios, which, yes, I mean, you can't look at those and think, no, we're good there, right? We're all set. But it's one of those unfunded mandates. So it's on the school districts to figure out how you're going to make those improvements, right? While we're busy putting out all of the fires and addressing the crisis, we want to get back to prevention. We want to get back to early education, earlier intervention, so that our students aren't in crisis, so that we can reach more of them earlier and get back to learning. School systems, they were not built to be the mental health triage. But it is what it is right now, and I don't even know why, I don't even like that saying. I don't know why I said it, but it felt like the right thing to say. It is what it is, and when our students come in the building with needs, it is our job and our passion to address those. And so we are in a youth mental health crisis. We just need some support in making sure that we're addressing it in the best interest of our students and families every single day.
There you go. Okay. Thank you very much for your time and your support and all the things that we're doing for our students in North Carolina and Cabarrus County Schools.
So, Amy, so just to get your...
Yeah, we were going to see if if you guys would like to ask them questions while they're here at the podium and answer those.
Yep, I had 3. So going back to the slide where you had the different buckets for calls from students, I saw harassment was the third leading. What's in that bucket?
Harassment is going to include, I think that covers bullying. I need to go back and make sure under the definition, but that oftentimes may be a student saying that another student is harassing them through, it could be verbal, it could be in writing. I think that it's more of that along those bullying lines.
Okay.
Yeah, so Representative Williams, statute 115.40715 is the bullying harassment statute. So that would, in that statute, that would fall under all those things that we mentioned there. That's what would cover it. So if you want to reference that and take a look, I can send it to you. You can take a look at it. I think it'll give you better clarity as to what we're talking about.
Thank you. And you mentioned additional staff being trained as CIT, mental health first aid. SROs are also trained as well?
So our SROs have training through their law enforcement agencies. They sometimes partner with us in some of the mental health trainings as well in our crisis curriculum. I don't know for sure. I don't have their rosters to say who has been trained in what, but if you need that information, I can possibly obtain that for you.
And isn't it possible, out of the 4,900 some odd students who are asking for help or seeking help through the schools, that some of those students are probably already getting help, or additional students are getting help through family services or from their family or whatnot, that's
Sure.
not captured in your data?
Sure. So if there are families and students who have services outside of the building and they're not going through school staff to get those referrals or to just help manage any of it, those wouldn't be documented. So that is specifically for students who the school has either provided direct services or has connected them to the direct services to bring them into the school.
So the number could be higher than that?
Of students receiving them outside of school? Sure. So we're only tracking for our school mental health professionals.
Any other questions?
All right. Whenever you were talking about the school psychologist and, wanting to have one in each school, so is that something that would that school psychologist only handle issues that are a pressing need at that time, or would the student have access to ongoing psychological care with them?
So if you look at the ratio, I'm going to show that slide again. 1 to 500 students would be ideal to provide that comprehensive delivery. But even if we had one at every school, I figured up the numbers for that, I would need 25 more psychologists, and let's just say in the next 5 years, we added, let's say, 5 a year, and our ADM also grew, average daily membership, to around 40,000, for example. Then I would still be at a 1 to 845 ratio, which is pretty good compared to where we are now at 1 to 1,500. And so I would imagine we could provide comprehensive psychological services in most of those situations. It would provide us with counseling, consultation, a lot of the, I guess, more where the mental health team for CISP comes together, we'd be able to participate in that more, and then continue with our disability evaluations and all the other psychological services components.
All right, and now how do the students' parents play into that? Would they be notified of, this? Are they aware of, if the student were to go in to seek these services, does the parent have to grant permission, or?
So, do you want to speak for a second about that? Yes, we have parent notification and permission.
Okay.
So, and you might still want to touch on like the psych testing. I won't touch that. So, yes, so the students can go down and see their CISP at any time they need to, and so we would never turn a student away. If the student is coming to the CISP person, whoever that is, to talk about something that might be ongoing where they have to provide potentially group or maybe 6 sessions of individual, that'll be a conversation with the parent. But they can always stop in and check in, but any sort of ongoing services, we would have to have either parental permission, opt-out, participation, something like that. I will say, everything that we do from the CISP perspective is very brief and solution-focused in nature. So I wouldn't go see any of those 3 disciplines for intensive treatment. I might go if I'm having an issue or I'm feeling anxious in class, or maybe I just had a loss and I needed to speak and get a referral for services. So I would say, generally speaking, if it's not something that we could, if it's not a symptom that we could reduce and work with a family within 6 sessions, we're probably referring out. Because students who need more intensive therapy, a simple outpatient session would be about 50 minutes per week to work on some things. And I think in that type of treatment, it can stir up a lot of things for people. And so we wouldn't want to create that and then send a student back into class. So it really depends on the situation. But as far as any ongoing services or group work, there would be parent notification, participation, depending on the situation.
And then just to follow up with the psychological testing, the evaluation and assessment component, we require parent permission before we engage in any type of disability evaluation.
Correct.
Thank you.
Did we answer?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Sorry, thanks you for what you're doing and the work that you put into this. I just have a question on the parental notification. If the condition of the child actually involves the parent and the parent's the problem, you have to figure out a way. How do you address that?
Yeah, those ones are tricky, and so we always have to act in the best interest of our students. So if it is not, we always tell our students when they come and speak with us, things can stay confidential unless you tell me that someone's hurting you, you know of somebody being hurt, or you're hurting somebody else. So those are the reasons we would break confidentiality. So if a student comes to one of the CISP team members and we find out they are potentially being hurt by a caretaker, we work closely with social services if it's appropriate to one, make a report if it's necessary, or 2, if they already have involvement, to get some guidance from our liaisons there to see how we need to proceed. But as far as getting consent for like ongoing services, that has to go through a guardian. Sure.
I have a question. If someone wanted to understand the unfunded positions that you are talking about, where can they get more information on that?
Ms. Sandage, are you speaking about sort of like the descriptions of the professions or the actual mandate from the state?
So I want to understand what staff we need that we don't have the funding for.
Sure.
Where do I find that information? Who do I talk to?
Any one of us would be happy to send you those job descriptions and numbers if you'd like. Absolutely.
My second question is, unfortunately, I had to experience a crisis with my own child at a school during the school day, so I had to go through, or she had to go through, what a crisis looks like at a school. The question that I had as a parent and many other parents that were in that crisis was, this is one crisis at one school, and there were hundreds of cars. I'm I'm not joking. Outside of that school, and the question was, what happens if there's another crisis at another school or two more schools, and just how that taxes staff. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I absolutely can. Amy Lauder is actually our incident commander for crisis, so if you'd like to start, and then I could speak about some mental health triage if you'd like.
So in those situations, we take every day with whatever it presents us, and some days can be a little quieter than others. If you recall, back in the fall, we had multiple bomb threats over a 24-hour period. And so whenever we have that, we have fantastic community partners, and our collaboration with law enforcement, EMS, the emergency management, fire, it's just fabulous. And so all of them help support this work. And we run to the call, we help support there, and then we'll send others over here, we dispatch over here. It's just constantly juggling the resources that we've got to be able to manage the crises that are presenting themselves.
And I'll just add a little bit to that. So we have like an incident command team, as you would, but everybody has a backup, and there's a backup to the backup, and we all go through training together, and we meet, I think we're bi-weekly, monthly, just depending on the situation. We always debrief. And so when crisis hits, we know our roles and we know how to act. Just last week, 2 weeks ago, we had one crisis that deeply impacted 2 schools. And so you just kind of look at each other and say, you take this, I'll take this, and you get your teams together. So part of that is the teaming structure that we kind of referenced. So what we are advocating for at the school level, we try to be an example at the district level because, again, we just work better in teams, and I think so much of it is the training and the time for the training, right? And just really knowing your roles and feeling confident in your skills to be able to handle whatever we're walking into that day. So, yes, I appreciate that, and I appreciated you that day. It was a very hard day.
I think, too, to drive home the point, I think it's a great question. When you look at the numbers and some of the things that we're talking about this evening that Mrs. Lauder and Mrs. Jewell put together, those numbers should hit home. We're talking 4,600 individual students received services in September. 24,000 services have been provided. Individual counseling, 17,000. Group counseling, 4,800. Parent education, 500. When you look at the ratios, I think that's where a lot of I always think the devil's in the details. I think that tells the story. Right now, we're operating at, for school social workers, we have 31 social workers. We have 45 schools. I just gave you some numbers of the things that we're dealing with. Our ratio right now is 1,144 to 1. If we brought that down to just add a social worker for every school, covering one social worker for every school, we'd be at 782 to 1. If you added 10, we'd be at 858 to 1. If you just cut it in half, cut the ratio in half, and just doubled it to 62 social workers, we'd be at 567 to 1. When you look at those numbers, they're prominent because we're never going to get to the ratio that's recommended by the professional guidelines. So when we come to our local agencies or state agencies, and we're talking to you about funding to help out the people that are doing the work, these are the things that we're saying. When you look at the numbers, I think the numbers drive the story home. When they talk about the work that their colleagues are doing every day, it's tremendous. It's unbelievable. I don't know how they do it. And I don't want to belabor a point. I hate to even say this, but we've had 3 student deaths this year. And to me, that, we need to continue to keep funding the mental health side of things because our kids are struggling. And we keep coming to everyone. We keep saying the same thing. We keep telling the same story. We keep asking everyone, and I know everyone here cares, but these are real problems that we're dealing with. And it's from the home to the school, from the school to the home, and whatever is happening in the community or in the home, it lands at the school door. And we really need to make sure we have the resources in place to continue to advocate and support our kids. We have a phenomenal educational system, and everybody in here has contributed to that. But this is a crisis situation. This is like a crisis level situation where we need more support and more help from any avenue. We need help. And then to drive the point home further, you're going to hear a little bit about pay rate in a couple of minutes from Dr. Bish and Dr. Williams. Through the good graces of the Cabarrus County system, we're paying our social workers at master's level pay. But the state since 2013 implemented where you only pay them at bachelor's level. And Mrs. Jewell, if I speak out of turn here, please correct me. you need to be a licensed social worker to do clinical work. So that means you have to have a master's degree. So if our state is saying we're only going to pay you at a bachelor's level when you walk in, a bachelor's level social worker, while is very valuable to us, they're not allowed to do the clinical services. They don't have the license to do it. So that challenge is real. So we had to go back and reassess last year and look at our folks just so they wouldn't leave and go somewhere else and make sure we're paying everybody at master's level, and we are. But that's another challenge that the state has presented to us because they're only paying them at bachelor's level when they walk in, and the services that we need are at the clinical level. So we need those social workers to be at the master's level when they walk in the door to address these needs and problems that we see every day. So again, you know, I don't want to belabor the point, but it's worth belaboring that we are in crisis mode and we need help. We need desperate help to help our children. I always look at it as a pay me now or pay me later kind of scenario. We don't help them now, they're going to be, I don't want to say burden because that's not the right word, but those problems are going to continue, and it's going to be a strain on the system later. So as educators, as we know, the earlier we can address and handle these problems in the school setting with the expertise that we have, the better chances are that we can get them through till we become a successful, productive citizen in society down the road. So again, I know you're all hearing me, and I know you've been great and helpful, but I'm going to say it again, this is at crisis level. Like, we need help. We need resources. And what do I mean by that? We need money. We need people. And I would challenge anybody here. I'm one man running a district of 35,200 students. I'd be a fool to come in here and say to you that I deal with 35,200 students and 4,000 employees. I have resources. I have people that help me. I have tremendous people around me to help me and make our district work and function well. Imagine if you had to go in, you had to deal with, you walk in every day and you know you have 1,100 people on your roster, you're accountable for them. It's too much. It's not even reasonable. So I just say all that I want to drill those numbers home, and when you leave here tonight, think about that. And when we come to you, just ask for those numbers. And we could provide you any data set you need on anything when it comes to these issues, because we do have it. And I commend Amy and Amy Loud and Amy Jewell because they're tremendous at what they do. And they keep everybody around them functioning at a high level, so thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kopicki, these positions that we're talking about, are they locally funded, or how are we funding the 31 we got now? Is that local funded, state funded?
So it's a mix. There's local funding in some of it, and there's state funding. It's a mix. We get allocations for some of it through the state, but then we have to offset some of the pay because the state won't pay above the bachelor's level. So when we get our allocations or allotments, we have to offset some of that funding. And the state is only going to give us our allotments based on the ADMs that we receive. So ADM meaning the average daily membership. However many kids you have, state's going to work their formula and say, this is what you get. So similar to our guidance counselors. Again, 35,200 students in climbing. We have 98, I know I'm within one or two, we have 98 guidance counselors allotted to us for the school year. And then John Basleys and his team do a phenomenal job at distributing those guidance counselors across the district. But you're talking 45 schools, 35,000 kids, 98 counselors in the school system. So, you know, and I mean this in a very respectful way, but do the math, and the math just kind of, you look at it, you're like, wow, how's that possible? So even when our guidance counselors at the elementary, middle, high school level talk about being overwhelmed and being overtaxed, it's real. It's real.
Well, I totally agree. Mental health is a escalating issue in our local and nationwide school systems, as you can well see throughout all the tragedies that we hear of, all of the things that's going on. And early detection, early prevention obviously is the key to that. And funding is, of course, necessary. And, you know, I know that this Board of Commissioners, we focus on schools, spend a lot of money on schools, and want to continue doing that. And my last question, Dr. Kopicki, you would know this better than I would, but has there been a request made for these positions to the board? We got literally tens of thousands of line items, so I wouldn't know if you've made these requests or not.
To be honest, Commissioner Shu, I'd have to go back and look at last year's budget request. I want to say yes, and the commissioners have funded some, but not all. And again, I'm a realist. I understand there's almost only so much money to go around. I'm not, by no means am I doing this by pointing the finger at anyone tonight. That's not my intent, and I'm not doing that. I want to educate and make sure we all understand what the issues are. You know, and I get it. There's only so much money to go around. I believe we did ask for some in mental health last year, but I would have to go back and ask you exactly how much. I want to say it was in the lines of the master's pay, but I would have to go back and look at it. But I can assure you, we will definitely come loaded for bear this time around.
Well, I appreciate that, and if you could, let us know that, and let us know, obviously, it's going to have to be a stepping stone.
Sure.
Just like we did with the supplement.
Yep.
It's a stepping stone. You have to start somewhere, and I know that I, for one, would be more than willing to look and see where we are and what the plan is to get where we want to
Sure.
be. And if, you know, we do a 5-year plan, we do a 10-year plan, CIP and all that, we could do the same for this, just as easy. You know, lay it out so we'll know what we need to do. And then they need to be up to us for our part. And I'm sure with Kevin and Ms. Williams in Raleigh, they'll be able to help us that way as well. Funds coming from that direction.
And I appreciate that. I want to reiterate again, our county commissioners have been tremendous in supporting us build a phenomenal educational system. And we do look at it as a partnership and a collaboration, and you have been very supportive. I have yet to reach out to any of you at any time and not gotten you directly or talked to you or been able to have good conversation about some of the issues where we have lack of support. You've been very supportive. And again, our State House, I know the burdens that you're under as well, and I don't have to talk about your support because you're here this evening tonight, and I appreciate that. And I know 2 of you are newly elected, and I commend you both for being here today because I can't imagine your schedules. Again, our goal is, we're not pointing any fingers. We just want to make sure we're laying the facts out. If I seem passionate about it, I am. You know, these are babies. These are children. These are somebody. I always tell our staff, you know, my 3 children's names are Corey, Karen, and Lisa. And I've gone my whole career by saying, if it's not good enough for them, that's not good enough for any other child. And I always tell our staff, somebody loves that boy or girl coming in that room every day, coming into that school. Mom, dad, brother, sister, whoever's taking care of, somebody loves them dearly. And we want to make sure that we treat them the same as if they were our own. And I can tell you that our staff does that on a daily basis, and we're passionate about it. And we just want to continue to advocate for all of our kids in this system and make sure that we can together somehow collaborate and get more resources into our buildings. So I thank you for listening.
I had a question. Thank you. I'm sorry, just one final question. So as a parent of a senior in high school, I was just curious if you guys had, with the guidance counselors, they have to meet with the seniors before they graduate. And so has there been difficulty this year and last year with the guidance counselors not being able to meet with those seniors and talk about their futures because of having to deal with the mental health issues that we have in the school system right now?
The answer is yes on that, across the board. Our guidance counselors do not have enough time in their day to do all the things that they are hired to do. It's a great question, and the answer is absolutely. I think they do as best they can, but they're stretched thin as well. And I think I would be lying to you if I said that they're, maybe I wouldn't be, because they're tremendous, but they're so challenging in meeting every student. So I think the challenge is there, and I think the answer is absolutely yes.
Thank you.
Mrs. Lauder, Mrs. Jewell, thank you very much. Next, we're going to kind of transition right into the salary increases and master pay issues that we deal with that I've kind of alluded to a little bit. And Dr. Bish is our director, is our Chief of Human Resources, and her director, Dr. Michael Williams, is with her this evening. They're going to talk to you a little bit about the salary increases and master pay and kind of give you a look at some of the challenges that we're dealing with. And some of these challenges are across the country as well. So I don't want to say that they're not everywhere. They are. But the salary is definitely a situation that we're hoping that our state legislators can address and give us some help there. Dr. Bish?
Thank you, and thank you, commissioners and legislators and board members for being here. I want to make one comment about my friends, we call them the Amy's. I would share with you, as a former principal and as someone who previously was head of the Student Services Department, which encompassed the folks they were talking about, one of the things that's very disheartening to me is school counselors must have a master's, and we pay our school counselors at their master's level pay. Our psychologists have to have a degree beyond a master's, and we pay them at that level. Social workers are the only ones left out of that. And so I don't understand why our counselors are required to have a master's, and we paid that. Our school psychologists are required to have advanced beyond that, and we pay that. But we don't pay our social workers their master's degree. And that's just a little confusing. I don't know how it happened. I was probably retired when it happened. But I would just share that that is an area, and it does cause friction among our folks because they earned that degree to be able to do clinical work with our students. And yet that's not recognized for them, but it is for a counselor or psychologist. So I just share that as a slight aside to you. That's part of our recruitment challenge, is when we're trying to recruit social workers, it is a challenge because of that, and therefore the district has stepped up to do that master's level pay to recognize that that's what we want, are people who have that level of learning and education to be able to serve our students the best way. So Dr. Williams and I are going to talk about the issues of teacher recruitment and retention, which I'm sure all of you are well aware of. This is not a Cabarrus County issue. It is a national issue. I was overseas last summer. It is an international issue. And so we talk from the viewpoint of pay. And I know you think, well, there's got to be something besides money. I realize that. And I also realize that in recent years, the General Assembly has certainly made an effort to increase the base pay for our teachers. But we want to share some data with you and some facts that we hope will help you see where we are and what has happened, particularly in about the last 5 years, and the earning power of our teachers. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about what happens with the starting salary and opportunities for professional growth. Those are our two topics. At present, the A schedule range, that is the bachelor's schedule range, and as you know, North Carolina no longer pays teachers for a master's degree if it was earned 2014 or later. But right now, we begin teachers at $37,000, and a 30-year teacher tops out at $54,000. So I want to share with you that recently Dr. Williams was having a conversation with a bank executive, and we were talking to them about sponsorship for an event. And the bank executive made the comment, I don't understand why teachers have to work almost 30 years to make $50,000 when my entry level, day one, coming in the door bank tellers start at $50,000. The floor for almost any profession requiring a 4-year degree is now $50,000. And so it does behoove us to think about that when we look at the colleges of education who are struggling to get students to sign up to be teachers. The numbers are dramatically down. And I look at all of these educator prep programs and it really worries me, because who's going to teach the children? None of us stand here or sit here without having had educators in our past. So who's going to take their place, you know? So we also want to talk a little bit about that supplement for teachers who hold advanced degrees, that master's degree. That supplement was critical. I will tell you that we thought we hired several teachers this summer from other states. When they came and they realized that they were not going to receive their master's pay, they chose to go back home to their home state, and we lost them because of that reason. So we want to talk a little bit about what salary increases and master's pay really means in terms of earning power and buying power. And so I'm going to let Dr. Williams share this with you.
Sure. So good evening. So we did a little work for you here. So my entry into this profession was around 1998. So this is, I mean, you're 25, so it's a little bit of a personal journey for me as we start to look back. And the graphic that I've created for you here looks at two different people, right? Let's take a look at the red first. So in 1998, my first year teacher salary, I went back to check, was $2,310 a month, which is about $23,000 a year. And I'll be honest, on a very personal level, I remember it being tight, but not impossible. My wife and I started the same time. We've been in this business together for a long time now, and both of us, we were not married at the time, but we both have had that conversation of like, it was tight, but not impossible. Well, when you adjust that for 2023 inflation, you can see that that's true, right? Like my buying power in 1998 at that $2,300 was $4,240 a month. We were over that $40,000 mark, right? If you trace that forward 10 years for our first-year teachers, the first-year teacher salary in 2008 was $3,043, which had a buying power of $4,288. And our current 2023 first-year teacher salary is $3,700 a month, which adjusted for 2023 is $3,700 a month. And if you take a look at that graphic at the bottom, you'll see that the buying power, as we adjust for inflation over the last 25 years, has become significantly less. The same holds true for, in our purple area over here, for our 30-year teachers, right? In 1998, that 30-year teacher salary was $4,182, which had a buying power of $7,676 a month. Right, if we trace that forward 10 years, you'll see that it dropped $300 a month. And if you trace that forward another 15 years, you will see that it is, North Carolina right now maxes out at $5,400 a month, which is a significant decrease in the spending power of a 30-year teacher, right? And so I wanted to share that with you because you can see at the beginning and at the end of someone's career the change in the buying power and the significant decrease.
So we wanted to share with you a little bit of comparison. If you look at this graphic, it shows you the salary, average public school salary in 2021 along the eastern seaboard. And so if you look at North Carolina, we are barely, but slightly ahead of South Carolina, but not Georgia. We certainly are not with some of the northern states. I want to call attention for just a moment to Florida because I came from Florida. And the average public school salary there is that $49,583. One of the unique pieces of Florida is that a teacher can earn salary increases by adding certifications to their license. My niece is an elementary teacher there. She went back, took 3 or 4 classes, got her AIG, academically and intellectually gifted certification, added it to her license, and got a pay increase. She added reading specialist, and got a pay increase. She has these endorsements or certifications on her license. That is a pathway for not only increasing her usefulness, her ability to work across a lot of things, but it also is a way for her to increase her knowledge and increase her salary as well. She recently completed her master's and received her pay increase for that as well.
So we want to take just a moment to look at what this looks like if you adjust across this for inflation again. And I know the graph is little here, but that green line across the top is the national average for teacher pay, right? And that is that national average kind of tracing across. And you'll see that it's taken a dip the last few years nationally. That held true in North Carolina. And so the purple bar graph there is North Carolina's comparison to the national teacher pay. And right now, North Carolina over the last few years has taken a dip, and you can see that the buying power of a teacher's salary on average has decreased, again, significantly over the last few years.
So what we wanted to do is let you see this in another format. We took the salary, the average salary, we adjusted it for cost of living and compared it to those states along the eastern seaboard, the ones we're usually competing with for teachers. You can see that North Carolina falls right there just below South Carolina in terms of the amount. So in this case, South Carolina is paying more than we are. The buying power of teachers in their salaries in South Carolina is more than what we have here in North Carolina. And we're going to look at a county just across the state line where we find teachers do drive across the state line and take that earning power of South Carolina in order to make more money. So you can see the comparisons across the eastern seaboard.
So we want to kind of narrow that down. And again, you've got the same list of states here, and we wanted to kind of trace out starting salaries at multiple levels and closing salaries, end-of-career salaries. And so if you take a look here at North Carolina, you will see that our starting salary is slightly below the average starting salary in South Carolina. That includes local supplements, right? So that is a tribute to our county commissioners. You'll see it really significantly here on the next slide. But South Carolina, on average, their starting salary is a touch more than North Carolina's starting salary, including local supplements. The top bachelor salary, meaning a 30-year teacher in North Carolina, is less than a 30-year teacher in South Carolina. And if you slide over to the master's pay, a teacher coming in at the beginning of their career who already has a master's degree in South Carolina will make $3,000 or almost a little over $2,000 more per year than a teacher in North Carolina. The dilemma with that is that salary, that $40,839 in North Carolina that you see there, if your master's degree came after 2014, you cannot earn that in North Carolina because that master's degree would not earn you the 10% increase, right? So your starting salary would be $37,127. At the end of your career, the top master's pay in South Carolina is $62,842. The top master's pay for someone who earned a master's degree prior to 2014, you will see that North Carolina's pay there is higher, except if you earn that master's degree after 2014, you are not able to earn that amount, so your top pay would be $55,160 because you're not eligible for that 10% increase because North Carolina does not fund that for our teachers. Dr. Bishop, you'll click. So I wanted to really bring this down to a very micro level, right? So I wanted to take a look at Cabarrus County, North Carolina, and 30 minutes south in York County, South Carolina, and Rock Hill, right? So in Cabarrus County, our bachelor's first year pay there is, I'm going to go to yours, I'm going to change that just a little bit. Those numbers are a little higher. We have a missed slide here, okay? So our bachelor's level in Cabarrus County, in actuality, and I will get the correct number to you because I did not include the local supplement. I did on the second draft and it didn't make it in. So the bachelor's level, North Cabarrus County with the local supplement is almost identical to York County, South Carolina. There's a $5 per month difference. Okay, North Carolina, that's a tribute to our county commissioners because that $3,700 has a 12% local supplement that our Cabarrus County commissioners put toward our teachers in our county. If you slide over to that bachelor's 30th year, if you add the 12% to the $5,400, you come out at almost the same amount as you do in York County, South Carolina. It's right at $6,000. Everybody with me on this? I know our numbers are a little off. So our starting pay with a bachelor's degree and our finished pay with a bachelor's degree in Cabarrus County and York County, South Carolina is pretty close. However, South Carolina honors that master's degree. And so that closing pay in North Carolina is going to be about $6,000 per month. And that closing pay with a master's degree in South Carolina after a 30-year career is going to be about $6,800 per month. That's an $8,000 a year difference on what someone could earn in South Carolina versus what they can earn in North Carolina. And again, I offer tribute to our county commissioners there for that 12% local supplement. That is a big deal. That makes a difference between a teacher coming to Cabarrus County versus crossing that state line to teach in South Carolina. However, I want to make sure that we also understand that missed master's degree and that $5,400 closing salary there is a big deal, and our local commissioners are making up part of that, but certainly not able to make up all of it.
So changing gears just a little bit, let's talk about how do we allow people to grow in our profession. So one of the things that we have seen, this goes to teacher recruitment and it goes to the teacher pipeline and the fact that education preparation programs at our local universities are struggling. The first thing is the Teaching Fellows program, I can tell you, was amazing. The Teaching Fellows program was in existence when I worked with Cabarrus County Schools for 25 years, and it was robust and it was incredible. There are many people who would love to be teachers but can't afford to go to college. And that Teaching Fellows allowed us to take the best and the brightest. It was very competitive. And then they had to work 4 years after receiving that. It is very minimal now. We don't have a lot of that. The Principal Fellows Program is robust, and we appreciate that. Let me be clear. That is wonderful. But to have back the Teaching Fellows Program at the level it served previously would be absolutely a game changer for us in terms of recruiting our own students to go into the profession, come back to us, and then be able to teach. The second thing that we would like to call your attention to is we request the expanding of the advanced teacher roles. That funding exists only for a few districts. We applied for it. We did not get it. We were very disappointed. But the advanced teaching roles is an incredible opportunity for us to be able to offer our teachers opportunities that do pay more and give them advanced roles in the classroom without them having to become assistant principals and principals in order to gain enough money to have a living wage and to raise a family. You can't raise a family on a teacher's salary right now.
May I mention something on that? So I just want to mention there that Cabarrus County Schools is doing the advanced teaching roles work. We are doing it self-funded without support from the state at this time because the grant money was not distributed across all districts.
The third item there is funding the teacher support program, stipends for teachers who serve as mentors. Many educators are coming through alternative licensure paths. They're not coming to us through traditional four-year university programs. By virtue of that, our mentors for the required beginning teacher program put in a lot of time and effort to help them be successful. That beginning teacher support program is vital to keeping people in our profession. And so a stipend for them to be able to say, we recognize the hours you put in above and beyond your own teaching load to help someone else be successful. And then the teacher assistant to teacher. We would love to see a tuition reimbursement program when we have teacher assistants who then seek out and move to a teaching position. We have started a program here in Cabarrus County Schools working with several universities. We have set up support for TAs. We have found scholarships for many of them. A lot of work has been done. At this time, we have approximately 20 who have begun their coursework to move from being a teacher assistant to a teacher, growing our own. But there's only so much we can do. With the funding we have, there's only so many scholarships the universities can provide. That's another avenue for recruitment. We're looking at every avenue we can find to recruit people to the profession. Teacher assistants are a wonderful succession planning because they already know schools. They've been there. They know what they're getting into. And they are very excited. That first cadre is very excited about moving into teaching from their teacher assistant roles. So while we have been extremely grateful, I want to be very clear to our county commissioners for the improvement from our General Assembly. The world has changed rapidly in the last 3 years. And what teachers were able to do, the buying power, the inflation, we've all been to the grocery store. We know what food costs. Those are very real challenges that are impacting decisions people are making about their professions. I have had teachers resign in tears, telling me, I don't want to leave. I love teaching. I love students. But I can go to the bank and make an additional $15,000. I cannot argue with that. They have to take care of their families. When teachers have to work 2 and 3 jobs to be a teacher, even though they're sharing an apartment, it's very hard. I had a realtor send me a packet of pamphlets about a new apartment complex. Wanted me to pass them out to beginning teachers at a job fair. An 800 square foot apartment, 1 bedroom, 1 bath was $1,400 a month in Cabarrus County. And I just had to chuckle because I thought, that's 3/4 of a beginning teacher's paycheck this month. They can't afford that. So no, I wasn't going to pass them out, not because I didn't want to help, but I knew it would simply discourage. And so I chose not to. So please know we are grateful. Please know we appreciate everything that's been done to bring up the floor of where beginning teachers start, but it's it's a movement all the way across the 30 years if we're going to truly recruit and retain educators. Thank you.
Any questions anybody have for this team? Mr. Walter?
Yeah, just for clarifying, I mean, we're still competing with other districts trying to get teachers, but these are 10-month positions, so is that correct?
They are 10-month positions.
10-month.
Mr. Morris?
Well, yes, I just want to say thank you for the information that you've brought to us, and certainly appreciate your acknowledgement about what our board has done for supplements, and we have worked very diligently on that. I can recall, I think my first year as a commissioner, making a motion for a 2% increase in supplements, and it died for the lack of a second. So we've come a long way since then, and it's been in collaboration with this board as well. And I think that's the way we accomplish things, working together. But the information that you've given us tonight is extremely valuable when we're talking to constituents out in the county. You know, a lot of times we hear from folks and they say, why do you not reduce taxes? And we hear that frequently, and I'm sure you guys probably hear it as well, even though you don't have taxing authority. But you know, when you really look at the realistic figures about the increase in the cost of living, how can we pay more and with less revenue? And so it's really easy math. But when we have good examples like what you've given us tonight, I think it makes it a lot easier for us to justify to our citizens, because I think everybody wants to have a quality education system, and we certainly do here in Cabarrus County. I mean, as a commissioner, when I meet somebody new coming into the community, that's one of my standard questions is, why did you choose to locate in Cabarrus County? And most frequently, the answer is, I took a look at the school systems in the area, and when I looked at Cabarrus County schools, that's why I chose to live here. So it's valuable to us in a lot of different ways, certainly from an economic development standpoint, when we're trying to bring jobs into the community to provide opportunities for our young people. When you folks do your good work with them, that's an important piece of it. So I appreciate you sharing all those facts. And I had one question. You know, the comparison with South Carolina was interesting. Do they pay local supplements in South Carolina?
They do. That's a great question. So yeah, that's why I hate that bit of information was not included. So York County, because of their location in the Charlotte metro region, has a pretty substantial local supplement that looks very similar to the one that Cabarrus County does, which kind of brings those those salaries close. More rural areas in South Carolina, as they do in North Carolina, have less or no local supplement.
Yeah, thank you.
And I would say, Mr. Morris, I would say that one of the things that I'm very grateful for is as the supplement has increased, we have become more competitive with Charlotte Mac, because there are reasons we teach in Cabarrus County. In Charlotte, we cannot compete with them in terms of overall, but when the supplement went above 10, we heard people say, it's worth it now, I can stay here, as opposed to leave the county and teach across the county line. So thank you. That was critical in many conversations with teachers as to why they stayed here. I have to smile when you say people say they looked at school systems and chose Cabarrus County. In January of 1989, I came to North Carolina knowing I was moving somewhere in the Charlotte region. I was a single mom with 3 elementary-age children, and I visited every school system ringing Charlotte, went to the central offices, talked to people to see what kind of reception I got, and then examined them. I chose Cabarrus County in 1989. I don't regret it.
Well, that is very encouraging to hear, and as I said before, it's so important across the board in all the things that we do, and to hear you say that makes a difference with Mecklenburg County is very meaningful to us. I mean, and we hear these stories from local industry and local business, and you hear it on the news every night about the difficulties that people are experiencing in recruiting and retaining quality employees. We spent a great deal of time at our retreat talking about our Cabarrus County employees as well, and certainly there's no reason for anybody to think that the school system would be exempt from that. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Just real quickly, do you know what your turnover rate is? Do you see that fluctuating up, down, staying about the same?
It has fluctuated a little bit, Mr. Shoes, since the pandemic, and we are running right now between 11 and 12%, which is a little higher than the state, but it's not any higher than many districts around us. It is coming down. I track that every month. So I look at the monthly personnel reports that I share with the board, but I pull data on that every month, and it is coming down. However, I'm a baby boomer, and the last of the baby boomers, I'm way along in it, but the last of them are getting ready to retire, so retirements are up, as we would expect them to be. And we anticipate that will be true for the next couple of years as well. So we track that. We track retention. We track reasons for people leaving. The thing is, most people, when I track the reasons people resign, it is to make a career change or they're leaving the profession. And when I go back and talk to them, for many of them, it is financial. For others, it's childcare. For others, it's moving out of state or something. But the number one reason we lose people is not to Mecklenburg County. The number one reason is they're changing careers.
I have a question. It's more clarity. So based on your presentation, I see that you are asking to increase the teacher beginning salary and to bring back programs that were already here. Can you help us understand who has the power to do that?
Yes, ma'am. All of that rests with the General Assembly. Teaching Fellows is a program out of the General Assembly. We still have it, but it's very, very limited, very, very small compared to what it was previously. And then the salary for teachers is set by our General Assembly. And so master's pay also was an issue with our General Assembly. Yes, all of that rests with them.
One of the advantages of going to Raleigh is you get to figure out how the sausage is made, and that's almost as painful as it is an advantage. But, they come to us with budgets of what they think we should spend on teacher pay and everything else, and then go through the justifications for why they do that. Really not my point. My point was more, when you look at the salary differences between the different states, do you consider other factors such as tax rates, benefits, cost of housing, cost of living in that particular district, and does that calculate into any kind of these formulas that you have, or are these just basically pay rates?
Yeah, so that was part of what we wanted to try to show you today as we did the slides where we adjusted for cost of living and we adjusted for inflation. So yeah, we do take that in. Again, we recognize that cost of living in North Carolina is significantly lower than Maryland, for example, which would explain part of that gap. But I think it does speak a bit, though, when we take a look at North Carolina against South Carolina and North Carolina against Virginia. I think are two very, I think that's three comparable states that North Carolina is sitting lower than the other two.
I would also share that, remember, those are averages across the entire state. So Virginia, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, we have urban centers, we have large cities, we have rural areas. So when we average that across, we felt like it was a viable comparison.
Yeah, I don't mean to imply it's not inviolable. I was just asking the question.
Sure, no, thank you.
It's interesting, the chart you had up there that showed California and New York State as the highest paid teacher places. It's also the places people are leaving in mass exodus because their taxes are too high. So
yeah, we didn't put those numbers up. They're not a comparison.
No, it's just the balance. It's the balance.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Do you guys have the numbers? Somebody mentioned retention earlier. How long are teachers staying in Cabarrus County schools?
It's all over the map. I have teachers who stay less than 1 year. I have teachers who stay 40 years. This is year 40 for me. But I would tell you that generally, if I can keep a teacher into 5 to 7 years, they will remain within the profession. It's those beginning tough years when they are young and they're trying to learn to be a teacher, which is a very challenging profession at any time, but especially now. And then they're having to work another job, or they're trying to figure out how do I pay the rent and a car payment and student loans, which is where the Teaching Fellows Program comes in. If I can keep them 5 to 7 years, then we have a great track record of keeping them within the district.
But I would say we're seeing a little bit of change on that, with that $54,000 being the max that a teacher can make in North Carolina. So we are seeing a substantial number of folks that are coming into the profession and then getting out because they look down the road to, you know, I go back to my example of, like, there was a path there. I could kind of see it as I went through, of like, this is you can make it at that $54,000 mark. I would say that is a barrier to folks staying in the profession long term.
Sure. Thank you.
And most of them figure that out within about 5 years. They come in, they've come out of college, they are very much passionate about the profession. They come because teaching is a passion. It's a calling. And they come with that calling. And then they figure out there are the nitty-gritty things like car insurance and everything else that mom and dad aren't going to pay anymore, and they have to make tough decisions. And it's usually they make them at that point.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I might, I'd just like to, it's easy to count dollars and cents, but one of the things that I hear quite often from our teachers is that when we quit recognizing that education is important with educators, it's an overlapping kind of morale issue when we stopped honoring master's pay. And so that's something that impacts every teacher, that is not honored when they're in the field of education.
Just a few other data points. I think the commissioners brought up some good points earlier too, when you talked about speaking to the public about some of the different things that you're challenged with. Right now, according to the Office of State Budget Management, North Carolina is has the fourth largest growth since April of 2020. So only Texas, Florida, and Arizona are running ahead of us right now. North Carolina has seen 111,000, 112,000 people since April of 2020 come in. 94% of that number is from out of state, so they're coming in. Second thing, I don't need to tell you the Cabarrus County numbers because you've all been here much longer than I, but you've seen the growth. And the census from 2010 to 2020 pins us at about 48,000 residents moving into the area, and that's growing as well, right? Of that number, 26% of that number are under the age of 18, so they're school-aged. The U.S. average on salaries for teachers is about $62,000 to $65,000. If you take the $37,000 that we're starting at, assume a 24% tax rate for federal government, that knocks you down to about $29,000 and change, not counting state tax or local tax. Then just assume rent somewhere between $800 and $1,000 a month. You have about maybe $17,000 of expendable income. And I challenge anyone to say raise a family on that. So it's near impossible, and I think it was Commissioner Morris who made the point earlier, if you don't invest in the educational system that you're living in and argue that everywhere you go, again, it's a pay me now or pay me later kind of thing. The more educated you can make your society and the stronger the education that you can give to your children, the better your community is going to be. And I just share these numbers with you because I think it's challenging where you all sit as elected officials to deal with the growth. Growth is both a positive and a negative. Many good things come out of it, but there's a lot of real challenges that come out of it. And I just toss those numbers at you to say, hey, this is a real situation that we're dealing with in terms of growth across not only the county but the state. And your proximity to where you are geographically in the state, I could be 2 hours from just about any I could be 5 minutes from any great leisure activity, right? I mean, you've invested in parks, you've invested in the area, you've invested in schools, you've invested in activity. I mean, there's so much wonderful things here. I can come out of my office and walk to the arena. You know, and that arena has events going on all the time. I see it. So there's a lot of great cultural things going on here, and you're 2 hours from anywhere you want to be in terms of a beach, a mountain, a major city. I'm 15 minutes from major city. So these are all challenges that you face, but they're also challenges that we face as an educational system. And we want to make sure that we continue to provide the best for your kids. We're committed to that. But I just share some of those numbers with you because I know you know a lot of that and they're challenging. But I'll share a lot of that data with anyone that asks me to see it. I mean, I have a lot of data that we look at as we try and always say, what's the evidence say? What does the data say? What's driving those decisions? So we look at the numbers quite a bit to try and drive the decisions the best we can to help our kids. So again, I just share that with you to understand. I almost, when I looked at it and I realized that since 2020, we're the 4th fastest growing state in the country. That's tremendous. And that's it's an asset and a liability all at the same time. So these are challenges that we all face. So I just wanted to share that with all of you, so thank you. That's me. So the next one I'll be pretty quick with. We've talked a lot about this over and over. We asked for calendar flexibility. And what we're asking the State General Assembly to do for us, and I have talked to all of our state reps here, and they've been very responsive and very helpful to this, and we definitely appreciate that very much. We have talked to all of you, and I know that you're advocating for us, but we would like the flexibility to start and end our calendar when we want to. And one of the major reasons for that is this. Right now, we're a little hampered. When we start school later in August, we break for the Christmas holiday, then we come back after the Christmas holiday, and we give our exams for the end of the semester. So our kids, I don't want to say they lose everything they learn, they don't, but there's a disconnect. When they leave for the Christmas holiday, they go out for 10 days, they come back, and then we start our second semester in kind of the middle of January. And the break is just kind of convoluted. So we're asking, one of the things, so again, to data, we went out to, myself and Chairman Adcock went out to Raleigh and spoke with our state representatives and Senator Newton and asked, could you please advocate for us on the calendar flexibility, because we believe that it's the right thing to do for kids, but more importantly, we sent that in that Carl Sain, our Director of Academics, put together and showed 2 of the 3 data sets that he looked at showed that when our students take tests before the break, they perform better by larger percentages than they do than after the break. So with calendar flexibility, if we start earlier like we are this year, we can end the semester before the Christmas break. We're done, we give our exams, kids have a clean break, they come back after the holiday, they start fresh, and it's just a better academic climate all the way around. And again, the data and the evidence is showing that our kids are performing better when they take the test before the break versus when they take it after the break. So we're using that evidence to kind of drive this decision. So what we're asking is for our state representatives and our state senators to continue to advocate for us for calendar flexibility. I understand there are bills out there and there are different philosophies on this, but we're not on the coast. Our kids aren't working at the beach, not in large droves anyway. We're inland and we're far away. Like I said, we're 2 to 3 hours away from the coast. It's really not fair for us that we don't have local control of that, and our board gets to decide when we start school and when we end school. So we're asking just for all our state representatives and our state senators to continue to keep your eyes on these bills as they come through. There are many that are out there. A lot of state reps and have put out their own bills, and there's a couple out there right now that I know that our state reps are aware of because we've reached out to you and you've been very responsive to that, so I thank you for that. And I would ask you to continue to advocate for this.
Any questions about that?
I was just going to say, I know Cabarrus County is on a school calendar flexibility bill. Don't know where it sits right this minute, but I know we're on it. As I think I've told you before, one of the issues we have is getting our senators to agree that that's a good idea. And there's a lot of counties asking for calendar flexibility this year, and we're hoping that maybe because of so many asking for it that we can get more pressure on the Senate to consider this issue and try to get it across the finish line. And we'll be pulling for every step of the way, but ultimately it's going to end up in their side of the fence, and they're going to have to pass it.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Next, we're going to talk to you about the next two bills, not bills, the next two topics we're going to talk about is our pre-K funding and our adjusting of the school performance grades, how we rate schools and grade schools, and Sarah Reeves, our Chief Academic Officer, is going to walk us through that. Mrs. Reeves?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. There's a lot of reasons to be proud to be a part of the Cabarrus County school system, but I single-handedly believe it is because we are trying to be proactive and forward-thinking as opposed to reactive, and that starts with early childhood intervention. One of the great pleasures that we have had this year, especially with our school leaders, has been going through training with the National Center for Education and Economics, and we have been studying world-class school systems, looking at things like NAEP, what makes us different from other systems across the globe. And number one determining factor is early childhood investment. And so I'd be remiss not to mention that today, and I think that looks both at the state and local level, obviously, in terms of support, but we know that the economic benefits will yield themselves specifically when it comes to lower costs as it relates to special education, as well as the criminal justice system when we intervene early with our students. A few interesting facts specifically with Cabarrus County. So My Future NC, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that is a statewide nonprofit organization specifically dedicated to focusing on the attainment and the results of cross-secular collaboration between NC leaders in education, business, and government. And so a lot of people know My Future NC specifically in the CTE world and really making sure that we are getting students prepared for post-secondary. But they recently released a report card, and the number one priority for Cabarrus County schools was pre-kindergarten, which I thought was incredibly interesting. And so right now, if you look across the nation, and this is not counting international focus, across the nation, suburban county enrollment in pre-kindergarten programs is at 45%, and Cabarrus County schools is at 36% right now. And so I will say right now, we have worked very closely with our director of pre-kindergarten and CDHHS in the Division of Child Development, and we have been advocating for additional NC pre-K seats. We have all of them filled right now, and we have a wait list, and it is incredibly difficult to have conversations with families that desperately want early childhood intervention services as well as support for their child to not be able to provide them with the opportunity to do so. And this is just for our 4-year-olds. This is not counting our 3-year-olds. And so we firmly believe that this needs to continue to be a legislative priority because we believe very strongly that with a strong pre-kindergarten program and getting students ready to learn, the transition to kindergarten and kindergarten readiness ends up benefiting the entire community. And so that is just a few pieces of research, specifically data points that have been most recently shared with us and our stakeholders within the last month, and it continues to be an area of focus. The other thing that I think it's important to note is that obviously when you have students that are enrolled in a strong, successful pre-K program, specifically a pre-K program that may be at their elementary school, not only do you see decreases in child retention, increases in post-secondary career pathways, but also decreases in discipline and special needs services. So we firmly believe that there is also not only a social payoff, but an economic payoff for a school community with strong early childhood intervention services. I think that is it.
Any questions?
You mentioned the wait list a few moments ago. What's the wait list looking like right now? What's the criteria to become a part of that?
Absolutely. So in terms of, there's a couple different avenues that you could go down for pre-kindergarten services right now. The first of which would be the NC pre-K eligibility, which we work with them in terms of determining that criteria. Right now, we're at a point where the screening process is halted because we don't have any more seats. And very candidly, the last time I talked to our director, she had at least 50 names, but we stopped collecting them at some point, just to be very transparent with you, because we did not want to give our community false false hope that we were going to be able to provide services for their child this year. Absolutely.
I have a question. So can you just explain how many seats we currently have and how many seats we need?
Absolutely. So in terms of current seats, specifically for our NC pre-K program, we are currently expected to be at 38% enrollment, and that is determined based on what the Division of Child Development allots us. And so I believe the last time I checked, we had about 250 seats, and we had requested additional seats. So that was sent out, and we had requested the reconsideration. In terms of getting to the attainability report on My Future NC, we would need to increase another 355 seats. And that would be based on serving the students that would be eligible for NC pre-K, which would get us to our goal, which is about 20 classrooms.
So a little over 100 seats we need. Did I hear that correctly?
At least. That's just
At
based on
least.
wait list.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to tell you we need 355 seats because that is genuinely what the data is telling us in terms of getting to the place that we need to be for another suburban community.
So just for clarity, that's 355 more seats.
Additional seats, yes,
Thank
ma'am,
you.
or 20 classrooms.
I would just share with you that North Carolina is very proud of its university system, very proud. And I try as much as I can to advocate to take some of the funding that we're spending at the university system and put it into the pre-K, because I think our investment there would be far better served long run for all of us. So it's something I don't really get a lot of friction on, or traction, I think is the word I'm looking for, but it's something I'll continue to advocate for, is how we can be more efficient at the university level and use some of those efficiency savings at the pre-K level.
So to that point, one of the things that we're doing here in Cabarrus County is we're actually looking to grow that program. And one of the ways outside of what Mrs. Reeves talked about is through our capital plan. In our capital plan, R. Brown McAllister, as you know, we're building a brand new school there, again, which is a credit to the support that we receive from the county. We're going to have another state-of-the-art facility, which is second to none, which is fantastic. If we rehabilitate or renovate R. Brown McAllister and bring the Mary Frances Wall Center over there, we figure probably 75 to maybe 100 more students we could put into that building. So that'll grow our pre-K program. Also in our strategic plan, our goal is over the next 3 years to, I believe the number is 8, Mrs. Reeves?
Next year?
Next year?
Yes.
5 this year? If we have 5, we're going to grow it to 8 pre-K programs next year, and our goal is to get at least 1, if not 2 pre-K programs, 4-year-old programs in every elementary school within the next 3 years. I can't say we're going to reach that, but we set the expectation very high because we know we're going to start knocking on that door and be able to bring those opportunities to our community. There's a lot that goes into it. You have to have certain licensures. You have to make sure you have the adequate space in the schools. Our capacity is an issue right now. As you know, we're doing a school realignment study, so that's going to help us to tell us and teach us where the capacity is instead of guessing at it, to be able to come back to the county and everyone else and say, hey, this is where our capacity exists in our school system to put some of these pre-K programs in. But we do have a long-term plan to address that immediate need that is out there. And you know, Mrs. Reeves states it very clearly that, you know, we're, through no one's fault, we're a little below where the average is. We want to at least get to the average, if not do better than that. And I assure you we have a plan for that. So, you know, Representative Crutchfield, I appreciate, you know, your insights on that, and I would ask anyone to continue to support pre-K funding because it is definitely a need in our community. We are also at 44% free and reduced lunch and growing. So that means our kids are coming in under the poverty line to school. So the faster we can get them in school, the better we get them in school to serve their basic needs and help them to learn in a structured environment, to teach them the things that they need to be successful in school is going to be a benefit to everyone.
And every little bit helps, even 100 extra NC pre-K seats, 10 extra NC pre-K seats. That means 10 more lives that we are changing and 10 more parents that we can pick up the phone and call to let them know that they're off the wait list.
You mentioned the number of students that were qualified for NC pre-K seats. can you tell us a little bit about what that criteria is?
Yeah,
for quality?
absolutely. So the criteria, I think there is a myth around the criteria just being social economic status, and that is actually not the case. It would be any educational need, which may include social economic status, education, background knowledge, but it could also include speech and language delays. It could include developmental delays, all of which would constitute eligibility and ranking based on a rubric system developed. And we work in conjunction with the team at the state level to be able to determine which students meet the criteria. Additionally, one of the things that we are continuing to advocate for very candidly is that the exponential growth in this area, we want to make sure that we are revisiting that every time we're determining LEA allotments for NC Pre-K, because obviously we have experienced a tremendous amount of growth, and the number of eligible students moving into this area has also increased as well.
So if you have I guess this would be 4-year-olds?
And potentially eligible 3-year-olds, depending on criteria.
Right. So if you have a child that has no obvious difficulties in any of the areas that you mentioned, then your only option is some private program somewhere.
Potentially, or a public school enterprise program for pre-kindergarten.
Right, which we do not have here. Or do we?
That is a great question. So we do currently for Cabarrus County Schools employees.
Then that would be the Wall Center. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
But
sir.
for the general population?
Not at this time.
We do not. Thank you. That helps clear it up, and I certainly agree with Representative Crutchfield. I think the investment that we make at that level is one that pays off, as Dr. Kapicki has said several times today, pay me now or pay me later. And certainly we know the demands on our, and I hate to say it, but our detention facility, our human services needs. And so I think if we get these kids off on the right foot, that makes a tremendous difference. So thank you for your comments, Representative.
One other thing, it would help me if you could put a dollar figure with what it would take to get 350 seats. I know there's capital considerations, administrative considerations, but what are we looking for to put 350 more seats in Cabarrus County would help me. You may know that, but maybe
About
wave your magic.
$2.8 million.
$2.8 million? Okay.
Stole my
Steve, can you write him a check?
Good job.
But that being said, very candidly, we are willing to be innovative. I've had multiple conversations with Dr. Kapicki about what this looks like in terms of eligibility of students. Some of that, very candidly, should come from NC Pre-K, in which you get a reimbursement rate for the students that are enrolled. But we just don't have enough seats right now locally to support that.
Today, but we do believe we're going to get there. I also want to compliment and commend, and I think Mrs. Reeves would agree with me on this. You have an absolute jewel of a pre-K leader in Trina Wenzel, who runs your Mary Frances Wall Center. She is phenomenal. Another example of the excellence that exists in Cabarrus County Schools. So I just want to make sure that we acknowledge her too.
Absolutely.
I've got a question. So with this program, is there any cost associated to the parents whose children are participating?
Through NC Pre-K, no, there is no cost associated.
Okay. Because I had a couple tell me recently that apparently they had made too much money, I guess. So they did not qualify, but they were willing to pay, but they were denied because they made too much money. Now, they're not doctors or, anything of that nature. So, I mean, they're pretty, average income, but they were disqualified. So is it a situation where, some folks that are over the income cap, if it's expanded, could it be a revenue stream?
Potentially. The other thing that I think it's important to note, it's both educational need and economic. So it's a balance, and it is a rubric to determine that. So you will have families that may make above the median for the rubric, but if there is a strong educational need, there will be services provided and eligibility based on the rubric. We are looking at other opportunities and avenues to be able to support.
Okay.
I'd like to also point out that I think we all recognize that schools serve students first, but they also serve the families. that is so true with the pre-K. I mean, we are serving the whole family there. It's not just the student.
Anything else? Thank you.
So Mrs. Reeves is going to carry on and talk to you about the school performance grades
Absolutely.
and how we grade our schools.
So this has been a conversation for multiple years, and certainly one that's gaining a lot of traction right now, but we felt like it was a very big priority to continue to advocate for the way that school performance grades are reported out and the accountability measures for each of the schools. And so you may have seen this fall, the number of low-performing schools in the state doubled. And specifically, that has to do with the recovery efforts of the pandemic, but very candidly, the primary emphasis on school performance right now is proficiency and not growth. And so as a result of that, you may have a school that is reporting out a letter grade that might not publicly look like a strong institution, but very candidly, the students in the demographic they are serving may be transient, may be below grade level for a variety of reasons that is not representative of the quality of the education that they are receiving in the schoolhouse. Additionally, we firmly believe that there are other metrics in addition to proficiency that should be reported out, including credentialing, preparedness and readiness for post-secondary opportunities, all of which right now are not captured in the school accountability model. And so we continue to advocate for an additional emphasis on growth, which we firmly believe is a much more accurate picture of the quality of education in the public school.
Is this something you find it's in the legislature's hands right now, or is it in DPI's hands?
So,
So right now, it's in DPI's hands, and Catherine Truitt has assembled a team together, committed together over the last year and a half to look at how we're grading schools. Right now, we're doing the 80% performance, 20% growth, and our argument has been all along that, if I graded everybody here on when you show up 1 or 2 days of the year and how you perform that particular day, and I grade you on just those 2 days instead of taking the whole body of work into play, how would you do? So our argument has been not to lower the emphasis on performance, but to include other things. School climate, chronic absenteeism, post-secondary preparation inputs, extra and intercurricular activities, durable skills. Those conversations are taking place. I know that our state superintendent has just put a committee together of superintendents, teachers, and others. I believe there is representation too in the General Assembly. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure she was seeking that. And putting that committee together to look at the other things that can count as performance indicators. So instead of it all just being an exam focus, that it would take a whole look and a more holistic approach to the school. What are the other things that you're doing well that can be possibly counting as performance? And that's been our argument all along. If that number, if it drops from 80 to maybe 60, 70%, and the growth, what we focus on as educators is growth. We want to see 1 year's growth for every child. If we can grow every child 1 year, we feel as though we're moving children along. And growth to us is the more important factor to look at when you're measuring school success. The other thing is, I'm always cautious when you look at exam scores and just test scores on one day or one exam. It should be a body of work that describes the school system. It should be a body of work that describes the individual student. It shouldn't be one exam. Think back, if you will, to your own educational experience. I can sit here and tell you point blank, not every exam that I do grade on. And if they were to grade me on that one particular exam, maybe I'm not sitting here today. But it was my body of work over time and the things that I did over time that made me successful, as I'm sure we can all attest to in our careers. So we just want our kids to be treated fairly the same way, to be able to say, hey, let's judge them on their body of work, and let's look at different inputs of performance that we can stream into that report card. And Catherine Truitt, I think, has done a really good job with this in terms of expanding that conversation and getting us to take a look at it. I do believe, not this year, but I do believe next year at some point, this will come up and they'll change this and to make it more of an emphasis, more of a balanced emphasis on the performance and the growth. So we're just asking that if you see any of this come across your table, that to be aware of it and to continue to advocate for more of a balance on the performance and growth initiative. 80%, 20% is kind of crazy. Again, if that was like a 60-40 split or 50-50 split this year, we'd have all 8 schools. You know, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that, you know, if it's 80-20, does that mean we're any better or worse than we were? You just based it on one exam or one set of tests. So again, we're just asking you to take a look at the whole picture. So we just want you to advocate for this and continue to support this. And should you need any information on this, don't hesitate to reach out to anyone in Mrs. Reeves' department or myself. We could give you that information. But again, I do think that the state's doing a good job on this.
I've heard Catherine speak on this several times. That's why I was curious from the standpoint of was it held up in her, but I know that this is an emphasis of hers to move forward on this, and we definitely support her in that, so at least I do.
Yes, absolutely. And I think some of it is just knowledge and awareness. So there are some bills that will come down and designate if this is a D or an F school. So just being aware, how are we currently evaluating school performance, and are there implications, ramifications, or consequences, and are we taking into account growth, or are we just looking at proficiency?
Thank you.
So I have a question or maybe a statement just to put this into perspective. So if I have a student who is passing the class and then on that, whatever, last day, they take a test and they don't do well on that test on that day for whatever reason, and they fail that class as a result of that test on that one day, is this what you're explaining and want us to understand?
Absolutely. So
Thank
this would
you.
be any accountability measure, yes.
If you look at the statewide data, it's pretty clear. The correlation is with the current formula, you're really judging the communities they serve more than you are judging the schools. That's exactly what's happening.
Absolutely.
Anybody else? Okay,
Thank you for your time.
thank you.
Okay, next one, I'm going to ask our Chief of Staff, Dr. Kelly Probst, to address the Leandro versus North Carolina case. We'll be brief on this one. I think most people are aware that this has been a 20, almost 30-year now long process to try and get appropriate funding to the schools. And if this case breaks and this money gets distributed, this will definitely be a game changer for a lot of us. Dr. Probst?
Thank you. Matt, if you'll go 2 slides. So this is a case that's been in the courts for 30 years, initially filed by 5 of our poorest counties in the state. So what does it mean if the Leandro plan gets funded for Cabarrus County schools? I just want you to think about this. If Leandro gets funded, our children with disabilities and associated programs would receive additional funding. So would our limited English proficiency learners. In addition, there would be additional funding for at-risk youth and our disadvantaged youth. There would be additional funding for classroom supplies and textbooks. Often you hear of teachers having to use their own money for classroom supplies. As you heard tonight, as a district, we continue to advocate for additional instructional support personnel. Leandro would fund positions such as nurses, psychologists, counselors, and social workers. Our share of Leandro for those positions would be $14.4 million. In addition, there would be $4 million for teacher assistants. Estimated funding for Cabarrus County in the Leandro plan is $58 million. We encourage financially supporting the Leandro plan. All means all. All students deserve the opportunity to a sound basic education, and funding Leandro is essential to all means all. So there is a lot of activity on this week. Just to let you know, Superior Court Judge James said, fund it. By March 15th, briefs are to be filed, and he said sit in a room on March 17th, sort it out, and get it funded. So anything you all can do to make sure Leandro is funded, we would appreciate it. Any questions? Thank you. Matt, next slide.
I'm going to briefly go through these next 2 kind of together and be quick about it for the sake of time. You've been very patient with us to hear our conversation this evening. And again, I want to commend both of our Board of Education for conducting this, our state representatives, and our local elected officials for spending the time with us this evening. That alone, the fact that you're here, to me, just sends, it resonates a message that we're collaborating, how important our educational system is, and it's why it's so great. So I thank you for all that, and I appreciate being here again this evening. The last two are two bills that are up right now in the House, House Bill 219, Charter School Omnibus Bill. We are strongly opposed to this. I have a handout that I believe I put at each person's desk. If not, I can give it to you before you leave, but the talking points are there for you to look at. I don't want to get into a charter versus public school system, but I will compete against anyone, and I'll put our system up against anybody's and say that we will outperform anybody, and we're better than anybody. My issue with that, really, with the charter school bill is simply this. We need more funding, not less. And if we're all going to play by the same rules, then they need to do the same. And we cannot have anybody else reaching their hand in the cookie jar and taking funding away from the Cabarrus County school systems. And I'll leave it at that. But again, that handle is there for you to take a look at. So we ask you to please do not support this bill. And if you have any questions, you can please ask. The last one is a bill that Representatives Jeffrey Elmore and Representative Wilkes and our own Kristen Baker put together. It's the Prevent Students from Harm Act. This bill we support because we believe it promotes all the correct things, and it supports all the things we're doing in schools. The title kind of says it all, but some of the things in this bill, it talks about promoting character education to address the bullying and harassing behaviors that we see, provides child sex abuse and sex trafficking training for educators, provides age-appropriate information on the prevention of suicide, abuse, and neglect as part of the health education curriculum. There are also some other character traits in there that our own state representative, Kristen Baker, has compiled to put into this bill. So we strongly support this bill and ask for your support on this. That is the end of our presentation this evening. I'm not chasing anybody out the door, and we will stay here and engage and answer any questions you may have. But again, I just want to thank everyone here, especially the folks that I work with for their hard work tonight in supporting our children. So thank you very much.
Are there any other questions or?
I would just like to say thanks for the opportunity to come here with you guys and look through all this stuff and get educated on it and get your points of view. It's definitely helpful to me. I know how to run a small business. I don't know how to run a school system, so I appreciate your input on that.
Okay, we do want to leave a few minutes for anyone that is here with the public. If they would like to ask a question specifically related to the legislative agenda, we'll give you an opportunity to do that. You can come to the podium, and if you'll state your name, if you're a parent or community member, and then what the question is related to the meeting agenda. So is there anyone in here who would like to do that? Yes, ma'am. I think that microphone should be on.
Testing,
Yes.
testing, check. All right. I've written this down, but I've made amendments to my question, so bear with me.
If you'll state your name.
My name is Wendy McConnell.
Okay.
I am a Cabarrus County resident of about 30 years. I have one child remaining in Cabarrus County system out of 5, and I also attended Cabarrus County system, so.
Thank you.
I'm happy to be here. Our public school system in North Carolina has had major issues, and here in Cabarrus County, major issues. We've heard many of them tonight. Sadly, it breaks my heart to hear about the mental health investment or lack of investment, disinvestment, as well as we all know our teachers, which we have divested from and are leaving our systems. There are a patchwork of Band-Aids for this to fix all these problems, but fundamentally, they're inequitable. The investments that we have seen across the board. In addition, we have broadly devalued our entire education system such that gifted and passionate teachers are leaving the profession. Shouldn't these major and complex issues be taking all of our time as general legislators rather than spending time coming up with divisive, clever ways to introduce national party politics with HB 88 that will result in further dividing neighbors, students, educators, and community members at large. We ask that you do not choose HB 88 to introduce party politics into our elections for public school board members. And I don't know where the question is in that, but do y'all want that?
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to take questions, but it has to be about the agenda items that are on our legislative agenda. So does anybody have a question about a legislative item? Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hello, I am Dr. Amy Steele, former Cabarrus County Schools employee, teacher, and principal. My question is, what is the school system, well, what is the school board's position besides Dr. Kopicki's amazing argument about the assessment of student data, teacher data, et cetera, as it relates to growth versus performance on end-of-course testing? What is the school board's position on that? And also, what is the school board's position on the Leandro case and whether you all agree or support the North Carolina General Assembly being ordered to provide the $1.7 billion to fully fund Leandro? Because as we know, Black and brown schools are disproportionately, Black and brown people rather, are disproportionately impacted by the lack of funding of Leandro and have been for decades. So I'd like to know the school board's position, please.
Would anybody on the school board like to address that question? I know that we support whatever our school system needs, especially if it comes from our superintendent. So he has recommended that we support the growth and the changes in how we look at our students and how they're judged on growth versus performance. So we do support that as a board. We also support the Leandro funding because we know we need those funds for our students and we need those funds for our programs.
Okay, and that support is willing, or you are willing to ensure that that support makes it in writing to our General Assembly members, whom I appreciate being here, so that it's on record and duly noted.
We can do that for sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the board want to speak to those?
I just think that as a former principal, one of the things I always looked at in regards to growth is I always saw growth at every school I served. The longer we have that kid, the more growth we get, which also talks about transients. When they bounce around, it's hard to keep up with that. Every teacher I've ever worked with took the kid as they walked in the door, and they were trying to get that kid as far as they could before they walked out that last day of school. So proficiency is what we're all about. Growth is what we're all about. And we know that every student's not necessarily going to reach proficiency by the end of that year. But we're going to work even harder with those students. And so I just feel like the formula is just really not where we are, and it's not where we need to be.
Mr. Walter?
Yeah, I would support this board taking a vote on the legislative agenda. I think we've done that in the past, so.
Taking a vote on it? Can you make a motion for that?
Sure. I make a motion that we support and approve the legislative agenda that was presented tonight.
Can I have a second? Have a motion by Mr. Walter, a second by Ms. Lindsay. Any more further discussion about that?
Can you help me understand what we are approving? I didn't hear what was stated.
So he is the motion that we approve the agenda items as presented as our legislative agenda.
Essentially the presentation that was given tonight.
So, thank you for clarifying that. So are you taking a vote now?
Yes. Any other questions? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, that's approved. Any further discussion?
I'd like to make a motion to alter the agenda and add a discussion for House Bill 88.
Okay, we'll have to have a 3/4 majority vote for that, which is 5 out of 7. So who wants to put the motion up?
I just did. I put
Okay.
up a motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? How many opposed are there? Okay, so that passes. Okay, so now we will have a discussion. Ms. Sandage, do you want to lead that discussion?
Sure. I think that we've had a member of our community to come in and want to discuss House Bill 88, and I want to open that up for the rest of the folks that are in here who would also have questions while our legislators are here.
Okay, so you want the public to come up and be recognized to do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, is there someone that would like to start?
Good evening. I am Sabrina Berry. House Bill 88. Our school board didn't ask for this. I don't see not one representative's name for Cabarrus County on this bill. Our Democratic Party didn't ask for this. So why is Cabarrus County part of this bill, and can we be removed? Anybody?
That would be an answer that would need to come from a state legislator.
We have them right here.
From my knowledge, the person who would be able to remove Cabarrus County from the bill is the person that motioned for it to be added, and that is a senator that is not within Cabarrus County.
So there's nothing that our voices in Raleigh can do to remove Cabarrus County from this bill?
Not currently.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else would like to speak from the public about this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, Dr. Amy Steele. One of the things I wanted to say about House Bill 88 is that House Bill 88 proposes to ensure school board races are partisan races. That is a privilege and an opportunity that Cabarrus County residents have been afforded to choose their school board members and representatives in a nonpartisan way. It is something that should remain nonpartisan so that the public has the best opportunity to have the best representation on the school board. Making the school board partisan is essentially saying that the progress that we've made over the last year specifically to diversify the voices and the perspectives on the school board are then null and void. And that is not something that we need to tie ourselves to as one of the more one of the larger counties, but also the 9th or the 10th fastest growing county in the nation. Cabarrus County is becoming more diverse. It is also not just becoming diverse racially, but becoming diverse in thought and perspective. And we need to honor that by allowing this particular race to remain nonpartisan. I ask not only will the school board members support this effort, but also that our representatives here ensure, and representatives of the representative who is not with us, ensure that this bill does not pass and that it does not pass with Cabarrus County's name on it. That is my statement. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have time for 2 more people.
Good evening. My name is Marcus Singleton. I have a question to our representatives that are here. It's just come to my knowledge that we have been added to the bill by somebody else. Now, you're the politicians here, and you represent us, and we're saying that we don't want that. Where do you all stand on making sure, or making motions on the floor to make sure that that doesn't go forward? Or that we're removed from that?
I decline to comment on that. I didn't come here for that tonight. I came here for respectfully to listen to the agenda. I'm not here to talk about House Bill 88, but I appreciate your concern. I'll keep it in mind when it comes to the floor.
My responsibility is always to listen to the residents of Cabarrus County. For me, I do not support this bill as well as a parent of a student currently in Cabarrus County schools. For me, my best option is to make sure that I contact that senator to make sure that we have crucial conversations about it and ask why Cabarrus County was added, and of course try to give him some additional inputs from myself as a parent as to why Cabarrus County should be removed.
I can't comment on behalf of Dr. Baker, but I'll be certain to pass along your sentiment.
Thank you.
We'll take one more. Sir?
Mark Ortiz, Kannapolis. I would like to speak in opposition to House 88 because I oppose one-party rule. It's a step backward away from democracy. If we adopt the same system by which we elect county commissions, where it's partisan and the voter can vote for as many seats as are to be filled, that effectively guarantees that the party that has even a narrow plurality in the county will virtually always win all the seats. And we see this in the county commission, where the Democratic Party, which only trails 7-6 in voter registration, couldn't even get a full slate of candidates to file. If we accept House 88, the school board's going to be the same way. Or if the county changes demographically the way it's trending at present, it'll be the Democrats that have the shoe on their foot, and the Republicans will not be represented. That's the way it is in Guilford right now. Right now, we have a system in which people of different persuasions can run in the election and have a chance. We had a blend of Democrats, Republicans, and unaffiliateds in the most recent election. If House 88 passes, the Republican primary effectively becomes the election. And in that election, 2/3 of the county's registered voters are ineligible to run, and 1/3 are ineligible to vote. That is not what democracy looks like. We need to oppose this.
Thank you. No, we are done. We're all done. 1 minute.
Joe Rozeski, Concord, and I've sat here for 2 hours and listened to wonderful speeches about how focused you are on the kids and all that you're doing, and it is really inspiring, and I am so serious about that. And the mental health, so many things hit home to me that you talked about the kids, and that's wonderful. And all I ask is, how one simple question: how does House Bill 88 help our kids? Because that's what the focus is this whole evening by the board, the commissioners, the legislatures, our school, our teachers, our staff. It's been focused on the kids. And I don't see any way that that bill is focused on the kids, and I would just like to ask what I'm missing. Why is that going through? How does that help our kids? Is there any answer to that? Because sometimes things, you just have to ask why. And then
Thank you.
got to step back. So I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, board members, thank you to our North Carolina State legislators, our Cabarrus County commissioners, and our public attendees for being a part of this crucial conversation about the legislative items we feel are critically important for the continued success of this district. So at this time, we will call for a motion for the meeting to be adjourned. I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Have a motion by Ms. Escobar and a second by Ms. Lindsay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for coming.